We're here today with author Daniel Bukszpan. We're talking about his new book, Rush at 50. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you're back with a new book here, Rush at 50. Can you tell the listeners a bit about the new book?
Yeah, as the title implies, it's about the beloved Canadian band Rush on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of their debut album. And it covers all their history from that point forward. And it's a loving tribute from yours truly, just sort of talking about, not just the history of the band, but what they've meant to me over the years and, the cultural effect that they've had, why they refuse to go away, even when they're broken up. The music is still out there as much as ever. Why they had so many haters, every contentious issue that ever came up about the band, I tried to address.
Yeah, it is great. It's more than just a timeline. You really touch on a lot of interesting points, I think, in their career that casual fans probably don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of had two objectives with this. One of them, that is maybe the broader objective of the book, is I've been seeing over the last few years, Generation Z, a lot of kids, Generation Alpha even, as they're called, are just really starting to get into this band, even though they've been broken up for years and will never get back together. The music still hits as strong as ever. And so there's part of me that's like, well, okay, if there are new people coming to the group and young people, it is my job as an older fan in middle age to help pass the torch and sort of, give them the broad outline of it. But I also want the fans to get something out of it too. So I did try to, change things up a little bit from the usual approach to Rush books. So they wouldn't just look at it in the store and be like, yeah, I know this, I know this, I know this, and then close it. That was tough to do because they know everything about this band. But, hopefully they will appreciate that, I tried to look a little closer at some of these things. One thing that comes to mind immediately is a lot of early fans really had a problem with the band using a lot of keyboards in the 80s. So I gave that a sidebar. It's like, let's look into that and see what we're really talking about. A lot of people, as I'm sure you know, do not care for Geddy Lee's singing voice. So I got into that a little more. Just things that don't get addressed, even though to me they're big issues with the band.
Sure. I got to say one thing that I didn't realize, and I kind of miss the days when one DJ could take an interest in a band and possibly help them break through it. I never knew about Donna Helper from Cleveland, and basically you can kind of point back to her for Rush's whole career, maybe.
She would absolutely refuse to take credit for discovering them. She would never do that. But she will take credit for, being a catalyst at kind of a pivotal moment in the band's career. She would definitely describe it as, right place, right time, that kind of thing. And, she mentioned elsewhere in the book that, the environment to do that doesn't really exist anymore because there are no longer like smaller independent radio stations. As a program director in the 1970s, she had the freedom to play things that she thought, maybe the audience, who knows, maybe people will like this. Now it's all satellite radio. It's one playlist and, it's conformity from top to bottom. And I don't know that the first Rush album would have broken out the way it did in that, that kind of a radio ecosystem.
Sure. Well, another thing, I guess when most people think of Rush, they think of Neil Peart, and he was not their first drummer. And, I didn't realize how, I guess John, the first drummer, was almost kind of like the leader of the band during those early years.
Oh, yeah. Geddy Lee said as much. He even used the word leader. It was really important to me to give John Rutsey a little more attention than he frequently gets in, when people are telling the story of this band. He was dealt a pretty bad hand because, first of all, he was diabetic, so he couldn't tour. So that made it impossible for him to really stay with the band. And the other thing, which is very unfortunate for him, is that the man who replaced him is considered the greatest drummer who ever lived. That's really hard. That's gonna put you in a tough spot, in terms of gaining any recognition. But I mean, he was with the band from day one, including when they're playing bars and clubs and there's no money in it, and they have to hump all the gear themselves. I mean, he was there when there was no real payoff as yet, and they were building the band. And to me, that means he deserves more recognition, certainly, than he gets. I thought that was important to just give him a little bit more spotlight than usual.
Definitely. Again, Daniel Bukszpan's with us, so we're talking about his latest book, Rush at 50. And you touched on it a bit earlier. Rush was one of those bands that they had the major diehard fans who loved everything they did, and then there was a whole lot of people who just despised them. I mean, that seemed to be kind of the case throughout their whole run.
Maybe when they'd been together like 30 years, some of the haters mellowed out a little bit. But no, I mean, I felt it was very important to include in the book, not just that it was bad reviews. I mean, it really felt like these critics really had it in for them, like it was personal. And it's one thing to say, I don't like Geddy Lee's voice. It's another thing to say these guys are Nazis, which is crazy. But again, the press, the critic class, for whatever reason, a lot of them just absolutely hated them. And I included some of the reviews in there, and they're it's like again, it's one thing not to like the music. That's fair game. If you don't like it, you don't like it. But you can tell when you read these reviews, and I've written album reviews obviously in my lifetime, and when you get a bad one, sometimes there's this temptation for all the critics to pile on to the point where it's more about them than about what they're reviewing.
Sure.
And they were really in that situation for like 30 years. And I don't know that a lot of people could withstand, 30 years of the critics saying, you were absolutely the worst thing ever in the history of recorded sound. And this is the worst thing I've ever heard. It's crazy. And to me, they're not even really doing their job as critics anymore. They're just haters at that point. And yes, the Rush absolutely has quite a few haters. They're definitely out there. But, at the same time, that's offset by how much the fans love them. And perhaps even, I would say, all the hatred from critics maybe even had the effect of making the fans dig in even harder and love them even more. Because, when someone attacks something you love, you get very defensive and want to, protect it fiercely. And I don't know. I don't know that the critics really took that into account. I just know what I included in the book. Most of it is deranged. That's the only word I can use. I don't hate anything as much as those critics hated that and said so. So worth mentioning, I thought.
One thing you have to say, whether you liked all of their albums or not, Rush was never afraid to mix things up and, make drastic changes to their sound over their career. Fearlessly so. They were willing to risk, possibly even alienating their own fans with some musical choices that they made. But, the overall mission was always, change, evolve. The next record cannot be the same as the previous record. That's really what they were about. They were about evolution. And I think the fans appreciate that. I said so in the book. There's a couple of their albums I don't really care for so much. But when I look at it in terms of the larger catalog and the continuum of what they've done, those albums absolutely belong there because they're part of the evolution. I appreciate that
they were experimenting. I appreciate that they wanted to grow and always be vital, and always be presenting something new to fans. Most of the bands that are out there, especially bands that have been around for decades, after a while it gets into this kind of like, repeat, same thing, same thing. And some fans are totally fine with that. They want that. But these guys asked more of themselves, I would say. And, we have this catalog now that we can dive into, years later, that still holds up. Even if at the time when a certain record came out or whatever, it was viewed as a misstep, years later, it's held up. So, that's my take on the matter.
Yeah, it is great that after so many years, people finally started to come around, as you mentioned, and they went into the Rock Hall, and your book helps with this sort of thing. And I know Alex and Geddy, they've performed together a couple times since the band broke up. I'm sure Rush with a new drummer would never happen, but do you think the other two guys, will they maybe continue to perform together in some other form?
I can't see them just never playing. Well, I mean, they've already played a couple of times together since Neil passed. So there's a precedent for that. I think that if they do it in sort of like, special guest capacity, or always just use guest drummers and make it clear that these are guest drummers, then I think they would view that as not objectionable. I think that they would be okay with. Replacing Neil will not happen, and going out there with the new drummer as Rush will not happen. Not just because they don't want to. I think the fans wouldn't accept it. I think the fans would really have a problem with it. It's really a thing where I feel like, the band and the fans are really kind of on the same page. I would love it if they were still together. I would love it if they were still out there playing, but, they had lightning in a bottle, and when that's gone, that's gone. And you can't, I think this is just me projecting, but I think they're aware of that. And I think that they're grateful for the time they had and everything that they accomplished over decades. And for them, I can't really see that they would have a reason to try to go out there again as Rush. I just couldn't see it happening.
Sure.
They're two good friends also with one another, and they're too close to one another on a personal level. There's so much going on there. It's just not, but yeah, I mean, if they, get up there and perform two songs with, Dave Grohl or whatever, that I can't see anyone having a problem with, or, with Danny Carey or whatever. But once it's like, we'll call it Rush, you'll start to get into problems.
Sure.
In my opinion.
I got to say, outside of Rush, I always loved that the guys seem to have a sense of humor. I don't know if you'd think of Rush as a humorous band, but like when you see Alex on Trailer Park Boys, or,
Right.
Geddy Lee hanging out with the Strange Brew guys, and some of these things they've done outside. I always loved that they were able to kind of go that extra mile with that.
Well, the reputation that they may have had as like, humorless and serious, just did not align with what I was told by the people I interviewed for this book. There were a lot of people I spoke to who did sound for them and toured with them and that sort of thing. And they described all three of them as just like hilariously funny guys who were just constantly cracking jokes nonstop, all three of them. And, that's a side of them that I think a lot of fans just didn't get to see necessarily. But when, they took a hiatus, in the late 90s, because of what happened to Neil Peart's family. And they said that when they came back, their attitude was anything that they were asked to do that they normally would have said no to, they would now say yes to. And that's why they were on Colbert Report. That's why they, hung out with the South Park guys. That's why they were in I Love You, Man. They were just like, at this point, why not? Let's do it. Sure. Who cares?
Well, Daniel, again, Rush at 50 is just out here. You are always working on something. Do you have another book in mind or anything else maybe coming up we should watch out for?
I am halfway through the manuscript for Iron Maiden at 50, which comes out next year, probably
Okay.
around this time.
Yeah, it's incredible that all these bands have these big milestone anniversaries all around the same time.
Well, and it also like reminds me, I am old. I just turned 55. And it's funny. My last book was Ozzy at 75. Now there's Rush. There will be Iron Maiden, and to me, this is all music from when I was a teenager. And it's just funny now that that we're throwing around numbers like 50 and 75, and because this is all music from when I was young. I associate it with my youth. But these Alex Lifeson has arthritis now. Neil Peart was dealing with tendonitis. We're dealing with just the regular wear and tear that happens with age, and it's for me, it's a bit of a reality check too, where it's like, okay, no, I'm not 17 anymore. But these guys have helped me over that span of decades to just deal with life, adult life, just by making this music that has been so meaningful to me and so helpful to me.
Well, again, the book is great, and any Rush fans out there, whether you've loved them since the first early years or up till recently, there's definitely some stuff in there that you probably didn't know before. And Daniel, it's always great speaking with you, and I'm hoping maybe we can do it again here coming up when the Iron Maiden book comes out.
I will be here and happy to do it.
All right, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
And again, that was Daniel Bukszpan. His new book, Rush at 50, is out now.